You were woken up before dawn so you could go to Sumerian school once again. You sit on the hard floor, breathing in the smell of damp clay, trying not to fall asleep and not to earn a smack for crooked cuneiform. Your life is an endless cycle of lessons, punishments, boredom, and fear of making a mistake. They keep telling you that you are chosen, that you're lucky to be born into a family able to send a son to the Aduba. But all you really want is not to mix up bread and death on your tablet so your name doesn't become another joke in the markets of Sumerian civilization. Here, among the indifference of others, clay tablets, and strict teachers, your real adult life begins with the first wedge, the first fear, the first rebellion against boredom. Welcome to a world where childhood does not end when you want it to, but when others decide for you. But before you settle in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see who has joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You wake up before the sun has even made up its mind to rise over the dust and clay of the Sumerian city. Your sleep is not the deep, dreamless kind that promises rest, but the shallow, anxious dozing of someone who knows what the day will bring. You lie on your thin mat, the rough fibers scratching your arms, and listen to the chorus of early noises. Someone in the neighboring room is already up, probably your mother, moving quietly, trying not to disturb the house, but failing as usual. There is the distant grumble of a donkey, a cough from the next house over, the heavy silence of a world not yet awake, but not exactly asleep either. You think about staying right where you are. Maybe, just maybe, if you keep your eyes squeezed shut and breathe as slowly as possible, the day will change its mind and leave you alone. But Sumerian days are relentless, and so is your family. You are not a farmer's son, so you do not get to skip school in favor of field work. Your father is a scribe, or at least he wants you to be one. He believes in the power of words pressed into wet clay. He believes that the future belongs to those who can read and write, and that you, his second son, will be one of them, whether you like it or not. You sit up and rub your face. There is dust everywhere, a constant, uninvited guest in the Sumerian house. You can hear your mother sigh as she sets a bowl on the low table. It is some kind of breakfast, though in Sumer, breakfast is more a matter of survival than pleasure. You move slowly, on purpose, but your mother is watching, so you pretend you are just tired, not resisting. You eat bread that is more clay than grain, a few wrinkled dates, a sip of bitter beer too weak to make you forget where you are. Your little brother is already up, fidgeting, but he is too young for school, so he is almost happy. You envy him, which is pointless, but you do it anyway. Outside, the city is waking up too. There are sounds of merchants opening shutters and calling to each other in voices hoarse from sleep. Someone is yelling at an ox that refuses to move. The air smells of river and mud, and beneath that, something sharp and metallic, like fear or ambition. You wonder, as you do every morning, Why your family is so determined to make you into a scribe, why you cannot simply do something ordinary and forgettable like mending nets or hauling reeds from the marshes. But no, your destiny is apparently to spend your days in the Aduba, the House of Tablets. That is what they call the school with a sort of grim pride, as though the name alone makes it special. Your father insists that only boys like you, sons of the privileged, get to enter its walls. You notice that he does not mention that girls are left out entirely, or that many boys would rather be left out too. You dress, pulling on clothes that are simple and practical, because Sumer does not care for fashion among its school children. You try to tie the belt the way your father showed you, but your fingers are stiff with sleep and dread. You can already feel the weight of the coming day settling over you like another layer of dust. You say nothing to your mother as you leave. She does not expect you to. Your father is not there. He has gone ahead or is pretending to be busy elsewhere. This is a ritual. Everyone plays their part. No one enjoys it. Outside, the city looms, old and tired, its walls pressed together by centuries of ambition and regret. You step onto the street and join the thin trickle of other boys, all heading in the same direction, all wearing the same look of quiet resignation. You wonder, as you always do, what would happen if you simply kept walking past the Aduba, past the river, out into the open land, where the only script is the pattern of birds in the sky. But you already know the answer. Sumerian parents are very good at finding lost children. You walk on. The day begins, and you are powerless to stop it. Ahead, the adobe waits, solid and square and ugly as a block of dried mud. The other boys shuffle beside you, silent, each of you carrying your own invisible burden of expectation. It is, in a way, comforting. Misery loves company, even in Sumer. There will be lessons and writing and the constant fear of making a mistake. There will be stories about the glory of the written word and reminders that you are lucky, so lucky to be here. No one will mention that luck can sometimes feel a lot like a curse. You do not say goodbye to childhood. No one does in Sumer. You simply wake up, eat your bread, and go to school. You step out of your house and into the streets of your city, which is neither the largest nor the smallest in Sumer, but just large enough for you to get lost if you ever had the nerve to try. The dawn light is thin, barely illuminating the maze of narrow alleys between mud brick walls. You tell yourself that today you might actually pay attention to where your feet take you, but your mind drifts. The streets are always the same, filled with yesterday's dust and the sound of today's complaints. As you walk, you join the slow parade of boys, all moving in the direction of the Aduba. Nobody speaks at first. Even the bravest of your peers knows better than to waste words so early. You hear only the shuffle of feet, the occasional cough, the slosh of a water jug on someone's back. Sometimes you wonder if the city itself is listening, waiting for you all to say something interesting for once. The road to the school winds past the bazaar, Merchants are already unpacking their goods: jars of oil, sacks of grain, baskets of dried fish that never quite lose their smell. You catch a glimpse of a potter shaping wet clay on his wheel, hands covered in gray sludge. For a moment, you envy him. His work looks simple, repetitive perhaps, but at least no one expects him to become a living tablet, a vessel for the words of kings and gods. A group of younger children, too small or too poor for school, dart around your feet. They laugh and chase each other, their games as chaotic as a city festival. You wonder how long they will remain free from the tyranny of education. Some will never learn to write, and there is a part of you, a mean, secret part, that wishes you could join them just for a day. But you are not allowed such thoughts, not out loud. You reach the river. The mighty Euphrates cuts through the city, a sluggish artery of brown water. Its banks are littered with reed boats, tangled fishing nets, and, occasionally, the broken dreams of someone who thought they could outsmart the current. The bridge is crowded this morning. You move across, pressed shoulder to shoulder with other boys, all equally determined to delay their arrival as long as possible. The bridge creaks beneath your weight, as if even it is tired of the endless march to knowledge. On the other side, you spot the temple rising above the rooftops. It is impossible to ignore, a monument to gods who probably do not care whether you can write their names or not. Some mornings you imagine them looking down, amused by the sight of so many small humans pretending that writing can change their fate. You do not pray, not today. You have enough to worry about without inviting divine attention. As you near the Aduba, the crowd thickens. A few boys cluster in nervous groups, whispering about yesterday's lesson, or the new sign the teacher introduced, or who got caught napping and what the punishment was. There are always rumors, most of them about how much worse today will be than yesterday. You pretend not to care, but you listen anyway. Nobody wants to be the one caught by surprise. There are boys here from every corner of the city. Some wear new tunics, clean and white, a sign of fathers with wealth and ambition. Others, like you, wear clothes patched and faded, the product of careful mothers and not enough money. You recognize a few faces: the boy who always gets the answers right, the one who never says a word, the one whose father is a priest, and who never gets in trouble no matter what he does. You try to avoid making eye contact with the older boys, the ones who already have the haunted look of near adults, who talk in low voices about things you are not supposed to know. As you wait outside the school's thick walls, the sun finally rises above the rooftops. Its light is harsh, turning the street into a checkerboard of glare and shadow. You shield your eyes, more from habit than necessity. Around you, the city wakes up in earnest. Dogs bark, merchants argue. Somewhere, someone starts to sing, badly. One of the teachers appears in the doorway, tall and thin, his robe spotless, his face set in the permanent frown of someone who has long since given up on the concept of joy. The boys around you fall silent. You do not have to be told twice. In Sumer, teachers are to be feared and, if possible, avoided. You shuffle forward, joining the river of reluctant scholars flowing into the Aduba. The air inside is cooler, thick with the scent of clay and the distant, sharp smell of ink. You find your usual spot, not too close to the front, not so far back as to attract suspicion. Around you, the ritual of settling in begins. The quiet arrangement of styluses, the nervous smoothing of tunics, the whispered last minute revisions of answers that probably will not be asked. There is a moment, just a moment, when you wonder if this day will be different. If perhaps, against all odds, something interesting will happen. But it is Sumer, and you are a schoolboy, and you know better than to hope for miracles before the first lesson even begins. You look around at the other boys, at the walls heavy with the weight of generations of learning, and you sigh. The day has begun, and there is nothing you can do about it. The Eduba is not beautiful. There are no stories sung in its honor, no admiring glances from passers-by. It squats at the end of the street, square and solid as a brick left behind by the gods. If you ever wondered whether buildings could look tired, the Aduba answers that question every day. Its walls are thick, pressed from clay so old it might remember the time before kings, before teachers, before the first unlucky child was dragged inside. You cross the threshold, knowing that the moment your foot hits the floor, the day becomes heavier. Inside, the air is cooler than outside, but not fresher. The clay walls are lined with shelves, and the shelves are lined with tablets, and the tablets are lined with the tiny, stubborn marks of generations of suffering children, each wedge pressed with hope, boredom, or pure mechanical resignation. Your eyes adjust to the gloom. The windows are little more than narrow slits, meant to keep out the heat, the wind, and possibly any fleeting thoughts of escape. The light falls in thin beams, catching dust that drifts lazily, as though even the dust cannot be bothered to hurry in here. You find your seat, if it can be called that. There are no benches or desks in the modern sense. Instead, you perch on a low brick platform, back hunched, knees pressed up toward your chest, trying not to think about the pain that will set in after the first hour. In front of you is a flat slab of mud brick, worn smooth by years of elbows and dropped styluses. You glance around. Every other boy is doing the same thing, searching for a comfortable position in a place that is designed to make comfort impossible. The teacher is already here, of course. The teacher is always here first. He stands by a larger, more imposing tablet set up on a pedestal. His robe is white, or at least it once was, before years of ink and dust and hopelessness dulled it to the color of bone. His beard is trimmed with the precision of a man who believes in the power of order. He surveys you all as if deciding who will be the first victim of the day. The room fills slowly, the students moving with the speed of condemned men approaching the gallows. You notice a faint line in the dust where someone, probably last night, tried to draw a picture of a donkey. The teacher's eye catches it. Without a word, he sweeps his foot across it, erasing the rebellion before it can take root. There is no bell, no announcement. Lessons begin with silence. When the teacher finally speaks, it is with the practiced rhythm of someone who has explained these things every day for 20 years and will continue to do so until the gods grant him mercy or retirement, whichever comes first. Today, he says, we will remember why we are here. You know the answer. You are here because your father wants you to be, because your mother wants you to be, because the city wants scribes to count its grain and record its taxes and write down the names of people who will not be remembered for anything else. You are here because Sumer believes in the written word with the kind of faith usually reserved for floods and plagues. You are here because you are not allowed to be anywhere else. The teacher tells the story of the Aduba, house of tablets, he says, with the weary pride of someone repeating a family curse. Here we learn the art of writing. Here we preserve the wisdom of kings, the commands of gods, the price of bread, and the number of dead goats in a bad season. Here we create order out of chaos, mark by mark, line by line. He holds up a tablet, its surface covered in neat, careful wedges. Every mark means something, he intones. Every mark is a promise, a debt, a secret, a command. To write is to hold power. To forget is to be forgotten. You glance at your own hands, already stained with yesterday's clay. You wonder what kind of power you are supposed to feel, sitting here in a room that smells of wet earth and fear. You look at the tablet, and all you see are hundreds of tiny, identical cuts, none of them magic, none of them alive. The lesson continues. The teacher names the kings who learned here before you, the priests, the accountants, the men who went on to advise rulers and shape destinies. You are supposed to be impressed. You are supposed to be grateful. The teacher's voice drones on, describing the glories of scribes, the respect they command, the weight they bear. You shift on your seat, feeling the familiar ache start to bloom in your lower back. There is a moment for questions. No one ever has any. Questions are for those who do not listen the first time, and in Sumer, not listening is a dangerous habit. The teacher's eyes scan the room, daring someone to raise a hand. No one does. The day's work is handed out, another list of signs to copy, another set of words to memorize, another set of sentences that all mean the same thing, over and over and over. The teacher distributes tablets, slabs of wet clay, cool and heavy in your hands. You take your stylus, a slender reed sharpened to a wedge, and brace yourself for the long, slow crawl through the lesson. All around you, the sound of styluses scratching clay fills the room. Some boys work quickly, already thinking of the stories they will tell their families tonight. Others go slowly, each mark a battle, each line a tiny defeat. The teacher walks the aisles, his feet making no sound. He stops behind the unlucky, points out mistakes with a sigh, never raising his voice, but somehow making you feel as though you have disappointed not just him, but the entire civilization. You glance at the door, wondering, as you always do, what would happen if you simply stood up and walked out. But the teacher's back is straight, his eyes everywhere. The Aduba is a fortress, and you are its most unwilling defender. At the front of the room, a shelf groans under the weight of hundreds of clay tablets. Some are old, the writing nearly worn away by time and touch. Some are new, their lines sharp and clean, still damp. Somewhere in there are the marks of boys who came before you, most forgotten, their work reduced to a footnote in someone else's lesson. You tell yourself, as you scratch the first wedge into your tablet, that today you will pay attention. Today you will learn. Today you will be the scribe your father wants you to be. But the clay is cold, the signs are many, and the day has only just begun. The first lesson of the day is not about words or signs. It is about patience. It is about endurance. It is about convincing yourself, before your mind has fully woken up, that you are ready to endure another day in the Aduba. The teacher knows this, though he never says it out loud. Instead, he begins as he always does, by demanding silence so absolute that you can hear your own heart pounding in your chest, a slow and reluctant drumbeat announcing your presence in the room. Your stylus sits heavy in your hand, as if sensing what is about to come. You have learned not to hold it too tightly, otherwise your fingers will cramp before the lesson is half finished. You roll it between your palms, feeling the rough edges, the slight stickiness of old clay, the memory of every other morning you have spent here. Around you, the other boys shift and fidget, pretending not to be nervous, pretending that the lesson is just another stone in the road, easy to step over. The teacher starts with a story. He always does. A scribe, he says, must remember everything. A scribe's mind is like a river. It gathers every detail, every drop, and carries it forward. The one who forgets becomes a dry channel. The one who remembers shapes the land. You try to picture your mind as a river, but all you see is a trickle of water, barely enough to dampen the dust. He asks a question. Who can tell me the first sign a scribe learns? You know the answer. Everyone does. The answer is always the same. The sign for head, because without your head, you cannot remember anything. It is a joke and not a very good one, but the teacher expects you to laugh. So you do, weakly. The day cannot begin until this ritual humiliation is complete. Then comes the warm-up. Not words, not yet. First, you must draw lines. Simple lines, straight and true, cut into the clay with the edge of your stylus. Control, the teacher says, is everything. A shaky line is a weak mind. A strong line is the mark of a scribe. You press your stylus into the clay, trying to keep your hand steady. The clay is soft but stubborn, yielding in some places and resisting in others. Your line wobbles. You grit your teeth and try again. You fill the tablet with lines. vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines. You do not know why this is necessary. The teacher says it trains your hand, but sometimes you think it is just a way to fill the silence, to keep you all too busy to talk, to remind you that in this place, your time is not your own. When the teacher is satisfied, he walks among you, examining your lines with the air of a man inspecting soldiers before battle. He nods at some, frowns at others. When he reaches your tablet, he picks it up, squints, and sets it back down without a word. You have learned that this is the best you can hope for. Praise is rare. Silence is survival. Now the real work begins. The teacher recites a list of signs, each one a tiny puzzle of angles and wedges. He draws them on the big tablet at the front of the room, his hand moving with the certainty of years. Repeat after me, he says, and you do, your voices rising and falling in a tired chorus. Each sign is more complicated than the last, a maze of lines that only makes sense if you do not look too closely. You copy the signs onto your own tablet, carefully at first, then faster as the teacher pushes you on. Some boys try to keep up, their faces pale with concentration. Others fall behind, their tablets already a mess of smudges and mistakes. The teacher is everywhere, his eyes sharp, his tongue sharper. Not like that. He snaps at one boy. Do you want the gods to laugh at your handwriting? Do you want the king's accountant to read your numbers backward and curse your name forever? You do not know if the gods care about handwriting, but you do not want to find out. As you write, you begin to lose track of time. The room fades away. There is only the clay, the stylus, the endless parade of signs. Your hand aches, your neck stiffens, your mind wanders. You wonder if anyone has ever run away from the Eduba and lived to tell about it. You wonder if the stories about lazy scribes being fed to the temple lions are true. Probably not. Probably. The teacher notices your drifting attention. He slams a hand on the nearest table, the sound sharp as thunder in the heavy air. Focus, he says. A scribe who daydreams is a danger to everyone. One wrong sign, and the city starves. One missed mark, and the gods are angered. Writing is not a game. You mumble an apology. The lesson continues. You copy sign after sign, each one blurring into the next. You try to remember what they mean: grain, ox, river, king. But mostly you just try not to make mistakes. The teacher is everywhere, correcting, criticizing, never satisfied. You think, not for the first time, that he must have been born old and angry, that he must spend his nights dreaming of new ways to make your life harder. After what feels like hours, the teacher finally calls a halt. Collect your tablets, he says. Bring them to the front. You stand, legs numb, and shuffle forward with the others, placing your work on the big table. The teacher will examine them later, in private, where you cannot see his face as he judges you. You return to your seat, exhausted, and listen as the teacher launches into another story. This one is about a scribe who saved the city by noticing a single missing mark in a king's order. Attention to detail, he says, is the difference between greatness and ruin. You nod as if you believe him. Maybe you do. Maybe you do not. It does not matter. In the Aduba, belief is just another lesson to memorize. Outside, you can hear the city moving, living, forgetting. Inside, you press your stylus into the clay over and over, hoping that someday, somehow, the signs will mean more than just lines on a page. For now, you write because you must, because it is morning and the lesson is not over yet. You sit before your tablet, not the magical glowing kind that children in distant, unimaginable futures might use, but a slab of mud shaped by hand, left to dry just long enough that it no longer sags under its own boredom. In the Aduba, your tools are as plain as your lunch and as unforgiving as your teacher. The clay tablet is cold and slightly damp, heavy enough to bruise your thigh if you drop it, and it smells like the river in summer, thick, earthy, a little sour. You are supposed to be grateful for it. You are not. The stylus, your other companion in suffering, is a length of reed, split and cut to a wedge at one end and a blunt point at the other. It is not elegant, but it is efficient. You run your fingers over its surface, finding every notch, every rough patch. Sometimes, if you are lucky, you get a stylus that is still a little green, so it bends under pressure and does not snap like the brittle, sun-dried ones favored by the teacher. You wonder how many scribes before you have dreamt of snapping their stylus in two and walking away, never to look back. You think about the process that brought these tools into your life. Somewhere, down by the river, there are fields of reeds swaying in the heat, waiting for boys like you, or more likely, men desperate for work, to cut them down. The reeds are bundled and dried, sorted for straightness and strength, then trimmed and shaped with a knife older than your grandfather. This is what stands between you and a life spent hauling bricks, a stick and a handful of mud. Your tablet, though humble, has its own history. The clay is dug from the riverbank, carried to the city in baskets, then kneaded and worked until it is soft and pliable. Someone, probably another boy just like you, pats it into shape, smoothing the edges, flattening the surface. If the weather is kind, the tablet dries to the perfect consistency overnight. If not, it cracks and must be remade, a casualty of the climate. You are told over and over that these tools are a privilege. Not everyone gets to write. Not every family can afford the time or the resources to send a child to the Aduba. When your father was your age, he used a broken reed and a piece of scrap clay. You, he insists, are lucky. Sometimes you wish your luck would run out. You press the stylus into the clay, feeling the give, the small resistance, the soft pop as the wedge leaves its mark. Each sign is made up of these tiny impressions, angled and spaced according to rules that feel as arbitrary as the laws of the gods. One slip, and the sign is ruined, its meaning lost, or worse, changed to something embarrassing. The teacher delights in pointing out mistakes. The boy who wrote donkey when he meant king, the one who confused bread with death. You imagine a world where mistakes are erased with a sweep of the hand. In the Aduba, a mistake is permanent until the tablet is soaked and reshaped, which is rarely worth the effort. Still, there is a strange power in these tools. The clay remembers everything. Once pressed, a sign will remain long after you are gone, unless someone takes the time to smooth it over. The stylus, crude as it is, becomes a key, one that opens doors to stories, to lists, to complaints and prayers. You wonder if your words will survive the day, or if they will be wiped away, returned to mud, as if you never existed at all. Sometimes the teacher shows you old tablets dug from the shelves at the back of the room. The signs are faded, their edges worn by generations of curious hands, but the meaning endures. You are told that these are records of great deeds and small disasters, of kings and floods and the price of onions last year. You hold them carefully, feeling the weight of centuries in your palm. For a moment, you imagine that you too might write something worth saving. But most of the time, the tablets you make are used and reused. At the end of each lesson, the teacher collects them, inspects your work, and then, if they are not worthy of preservation, drops them into a big jar of water by the door. You watch as the lines and signs you worked so hard to make dissolve into a muddy soup. Tomorrow, the clay will be scooped out, kneaded, and reshaped for someone else to use. Your mistakes, your victories, your boredom, all washed away as if they never happened. You take some small comfort in the knowledge that you are not alone. All across Sumer, in every city and village with an aduba, boys like you are marking tablets with borrowed reeds, hoping that today's work will be enough, dreading the moment when it is not. There are rumors, always rumors, about tablets that escape the cycle, hidden away in a wall or buried in a jar, waiting to be found by someone in a distant future who will wonder about the child who made them. You wonder if it is true. You wonder if it matters. At the end of the lesson, your hands are stained with clay, your stylus chewed at one end, your knees sore from sitting. You gather your tools, careful not to drop the tablet, careful not to lose the stylus. There are boys who have lost both, and the punishments are never mild. The teacher walks past, eyes scanning, and you try to look busy, diligent, deserving of another day with your tools. You leave the room for a moment, step into the narrow courtyard to shake out your hands. The sun is higher now, the city noisier. You stare at your hands, wondering how long it will take for the clay to work itself out from under your nails. You think about the day ahead, the lessons still to come, the endless parade of signs and words and rules. You clutch your stylus and tablet a little tighter, knowing that, for now, they are your only defense against a world that expects you to remember everything and forget nothing. You go back inside, sit down, and prepare to start again. You sit with your clay tablet balanced on your knees, stylus in hand, and try to remember which wedge goes where. The first sign of the morning is always the hardest. Your hands are still stiff, your mind not yet surrendered to the monotonous rhythm of writing. The teacher stands at the front, his voice sharp as flint, reciting the order of signs you must copy. He expects obedience. He expects accuracy. He expects the impossible, that you will write without mistake, without hesitation, without the private, silent resentment that fills every corner of your soul. You glance at the sign the teacher has drawn for you to imitate. It is simple, just a single wedge pressed at an angle, the foundation of words for grain, life, king, or servant, depending on its companions. You press your stylus into the clay, trying to match his technique. The clay is firmer than you remembered, resisting the wedge until you press a little harder. The mark appears, too deep and jagged, but at least it is visible. You exhale, feeling a knot loosen in your chest. The first sign is down, only several hundred to go. Around you, the room fills with the tiny, irregular taps of styluses hitting clay. Some boys work quickly, each movement confident, almost careless. Their signs look too perfect, as if they have been practicing in their sleep, or else they have older brothers at home who drill them in secret. Others, like you, hesitate, squint, try again, erase, and try once more. The tablet is forgiving while it is damp. You can smooth out your errors with the back of your stylus, but only if you notice them before the teacher does. The teacher stalks between the rows, eyes narrowed, cloak trailing across the floor. He stops behind the cleverest boy in the class, glances at his work, grunts, and moves on. Then he stops behind the slowest, frowns, and utters the dreaded words, erase and start again. The unlucky boy's face burns. You look down at your own tablet and try to blend into the background as if poor handwriting is contagious. You move on to the next sign. Two wedges side by side, pointing in opposite directions. You draw the first neatly enough, but the second is crooked, the angle wrong. You scrape away the clay with your stylus and try again. This time it is better, but not perfect. Perfection is for the gods. You settle for good enough, hoping the teacher agrees. As the lesson drags on, the signs grow more complicated. Single wedges become clusters, clusters become networks, and before long, your tablet is a labyrinth of marks, each one with a meaning that you will almost certainly forget by tomorrow. Some signs are pictograms, easy to remember: a fish, a star, a foot. Others are abstract, strange arrangements of wedges that stand for ideas, syllables, sounds. The teacher says you must memorize them all, hundreds, perhaps thousands, depending on how far you want to rise in the world. You do not know how far you want to rise. Sometimes you think you would be happy never to rise again. You glance at the work of the boy beside you. His tablet is neat, his lines crisp. He sees you looking and smirks, just enough to let you know he is aware of your struggle. The teacher notices and snaps, Eyes on your own work. A scribe does not borrow another man's words. You flush, feeling the weight of the room's attention, and stare harder at your own mess of lines. Mistakes are a constant threat. One wrong wedge, and the sign means something else entirely. There are stories, always stories, of scribes who wrote the wrong number of jars on a receipt or mixed up the symbols for sheep and slave. The punishment was never gentle. Sometimes the city suffered for one man's clumsy hand. Sometimes families were ruined by a single careless mark. You remind yourself to check and check again, even as your fingers start to cramp. The teacher pauses the lesson to demonstrate a particularly tricky sign. He draws it slowly, pressing the stylus with deliberate care, explaining how each wedge should be spaced, how the angle should tilt just so. You follow along, watching the way his hand moves, trying to copy his technique. Your own attempt is serviceable, uneven, but recognizable. The teacher glances at it as he passes and grunts, which in the Aduba is as close as you will ever come to praise. You reach the bottom of your tablet and realize with horror that you have run out of space. The lines crowd together, the last signs jammed into the corner. You know you should have left more room, but you lost track as you struggled to keep up. You try to scrape a little more clay into the corner to make just enough space for the final mark. It is clumsy, a blob rather than a wedge, but you hope it will be overlooked. All around you, the boys finish their tablets at different speeds. Some sit back, confident, already daydreaming about lunch or the walk home. Others, like you, pick nervously at their work, fixing small errors, smoothing rough patches, hoping to avoid notice. The teacher calls for everyone to stop, and the room falls silent, the only sound the quiet thump of styluses set aside. You hold your tablet up for inspection, hands sticky with clay, heart pounding with a mixture of relief and dread. The teacher walks down the rows, lifting each tablet, turning it over, squinting at the signs. He makes no comment, only nods or shakes his head. When he reaches yours, he pauses, frowns at the crowded lower corner, and says, "Too many signs. Next time, plan better." You nod, accepting your fate, relieved that you are not sent back to start again. When the inspection is over, you scrape off the worst mistakes with the back of your stylus, smoothing the clay for the next lesson. You wonder if you will ever get used to the feeling of failure, of never quite being good enough, of always chasing after perfection that seems just out of reach. The teacher says that only the most diligent scribes rise above the rest. You suspect that even the best are haunted by the same doubts. You glance at the teacher as he moves to the front of the room, ready to announce the next task. You know that no amount of skill or effort will ever be enough to please him, but you also know that you are not alone. Every boy in the Aduba is learning to write the first signs, and every one of you is, in some way, hoping to be remembered. For now, you hold your stylus, press another wedge into the clay, and begin again. There is a rule in the Aduba that everyone understands, even if no one ever says it out loud. Praise is rare, punishment is routine. The teacher has many ways to correct a mistake, but very few for celebrating success. Perhaps it is because success is expected, or perhaps it is because the gods themselves are said to be stingy with their approval. You suspect it is simply easier to notice what is wrong than what is right. The day continues as it always does, the hours measured by the rising ache in your back and the steady darkening of the clay under your nails. The air in the classroom thickens as the sun climbs higher outside, baking the mud brick walls and making the room smell like a riverbed after a flood. The boys around you shift and fidget, uncomfortable and increasingly careless. It is only a matter of time before someone draws the teacher's wrath. Today, it is a boy 2 rows in front of you. He leans too far back, loses his grip on the tablet, and it falls to the ground with a wet, heavy slap. The room goes silent, every eye tracking the teacher as he turns. The boy is frozen, hands open in disbelief, as if the tablet slipped from someone else's fingers. The teacher stalks over, picks up the tablet, examines the smeared, ruined marks, and lets out a slow, theatrical sigh. "What do you call this?" he asks, not expecting an answer. The boy mumbles something, but the teacher is not interested. He places the tablet on the desk and turns the boy around by the shoulder. "Hold out your hand." The boy obeys, eyes squeezed shut. The teacher takes the stylus, your stylus, all styluses, solid and merciless, and brings it down across the boy's palm with a sharp smack. Not hard enough to break the skin, but hard enough to sting. "Again," the teacher says, "and you will copy the sign for fool until sunset." You feel the sting on your own skin, a phantom pain that lingers as the lesson resumes. The boy does not cry, no one does, not here. Tears are for home, if at all. Here, you learn to keep your head down, your hands steady, your mistakes small and infrequent. Sometimes, though, the punishments are worse. You have seen boys sent to stand outside in the courtyard, tablets held above their heads until their arms tremble. Others are made to write the same sign over and over until their wrists seize up. There are stories of boys who were sent home with their tablets around their necks, the mistakes inscribed for all to see. Shame is a lesson, the teacher says, that is not easily forgotten. There are rare moments when praise is given. They are so rare that when they do come, they leave the room in stunned silence. Once a boy wrote a tablet so perfectly that the teacher held it up for all to see. "Look," he said, "this is the mark of diligence. This is the mark of a future scribe." The boy flushed, but said nothing. Later, his father brought sweet cakes to the school, and for one afternoon, the bitterness of clay was washed away by the taste of honey. But such moments are rare. Most of the time, the best you can hope for is silence. If the teacher passes you by without comment, if your tablet is returned without a mark, that is as good as a festival day. You cling to these small victories, turning them over in your mind as proof that you are not entirely hopeless. You have learned by now to read the teacher's moods. There is the tired frown that means you have not done as badly as you could have, the raised eyebrow that means you should try again, but quickly, before he loses patience, the deep sigh that means you are in for a long afternoon. You aim for the frown and dread the sigh. The other boys have their own ways of coping. Some turn sullen, carving hidden marks into the corners of their tablets, small rebellions that will be erased before the day is done. Others become silent overachievers, striving for perfection in the hope that it will buy them a moment of peace. A few joke quietly among themselves, mocking the teacher in whispers, inventing stories about his childhood, his lost love, his secret wish to be anything but a teacher of unwilling boys. And Wazrahiat, for all the harshness, you know there is a kind of logic to it. The teacher is not cruel for the sake of cruelty, or at least you hope not. He is a gatekeeper. He believes that only the strong should be trusted with the power of writing. Mistakes in the Aduba are a matter of embarrassment, but in the world outside, they can be deadly. A miscounted tax, a misplaced decree, a forgotten offering, these things can bring disaster. The teacher says that suffering now will save you from suffering later. You are not sure you believe him, but you remember his words all the same. There are days when the punishments pile up, when it seems as if no one can do anything right. The room fills with the sharp smell of fear, the dull ache of failure. On those days, you go home tired, defeated, convinced that you will never be a scribe. But there are other days, too. Days when your hand is steady, when the signs line up neatly, when the teacher nods once, almost imperceptibly, and you feel, for a fleeting moment, that you might actually belong here. You learn to survive on these scraps of approval. You learn to savor the days when your mistakes are small enough to be ignored. You learn, above all, to keep writing, because not writing is never an option. The lesson ends, as it always does, with the collection of tablets. You hand yours over, palms sweaty, heart pounding. The teacher takes it, looks it over, and says nothing. It is not praise, but it is not punishment either. You take it as a win. You file out into the courtyard, blinking in the harsh light, hands sore, shoulders tense. Another morning survived, another lesson learned, or at least endured. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, truly enjoys this work, or if the entire world is just pretending. You do not know. You only know that tomorrow will be the same, and that you will be here for it, stylus in hand, tablet on your knees, waiting for a moment of praise in a world built on punishment. The lesson changes. The teacher moves from the mechanics of your hand to the history of your burden, as if you needed reminding that every mark you make has ancestors. Before there were signs, there was only silence, he says, and you hear the familiar rumble of a story that is not meant to comfort you. In the beginning, the world was mud and sky, and the only record was the memory of men. That was not enough. You are expected to know the story of cuneiform as well as you know the path to school, how, in some forgotten age, someone realized that words could be trapped in clay, fixed for all time, with nothing more than a stick and a little patience. At first, it was simple. A mark for a sheep meant a sheep, a circle meant a loaf of bread. You imagine the first scribes, hunched and hopeful, scratching out the things they feared to lose. The teacher says it was a gift from the gods. You suspect it was an accident. The marks grew more complicated. What started as drawings, tiny, lopsided pictures of heads and fish and jars, became something else. There were too many things to count, too many words for a single picture to capture. So the signs changed. They twisted and shrank, lines growing shorter and sharper, until each was nothing more than a wedge pressed into the clay at just the right angle. The teacher demonstrates on his great tablet, his stylus moving with weary certainty. See, the sign for star becomes this, the sign for mountain, this. The pictograms are gone, replaced by a code that only those trained or cursed can understand. You copy the signs, trying to picture how something as plain as a wedge could ever mean life or death. The teacher says that the world is made of patterns, that once you see them, the writing will become easier. He promises that soon you will not have to think, that your hand will move on its own, each sign flowing into the next. You are not sure if that is a promise or a threat. It is not just words. Cuneiform is used for numbers, for lists, for spells and prayers and curses. Every temple, every granary, every palace is filled with clay tablets, some stacked so high they seem to hold up the very walls. The teacher reminds you again that Sumer is a kingdom of scribes. Kings are remembered by the words written in their name. Merchants live and die by what is tallied on their accounts. If you cannot write, you do not exist. If you write badly, you may wish you did not exist. The evolution of cuneiform is the evolution of Sumer itself, from chaos to order, from noise to law, from fleeting words to permanent, silent commands. Once, the teacher says, no one knew when the flood would come or how much grain was owed to the temple. Now we write it down, and the world makes sense. You are not convinced the world makes sense, but you have learned to nod anyway. He shows you old tablets, rescued from the storerooms and the earth itself. Some are cracked, their signs worn away by time and touch. Others are still sharp, the clay baked hard, the marks as clear as the day they were made. This, he says, was written 100 years ago. The man who made it is dust, but his words remain. Would you rather be dust or words? You think that some days dust sounds better. There are signs, he says, that no longer mean what they once did. Some were borrowed from distant cities, changed and bent to fit new tongues. Others are secrets, known only to those who have been here longest. There are always more signs, more rules, more exceptions. The teacher seems proud of this, as if the ever growing complexity is proof that the world is improving, even as it becomes harder to understand. You try to remember the logic behind each sign, but after a while, they all blur together, just a forest of wedges leaning this way or that, meaning everything and nothing at once. You dream at night of endless rows of tablets, each covered in tiny, perfect marks stretching into eternity. Sometimes you wake with the taste of clay in your mouth, your fingers twitching as if they are still gripping the stylus. The teacher speaks of the purposes of cuneiform. It is a tool for power, for keeping secrets, for remembering promises and debts. It is used to praise kings and threaten rivals. It can be poetry, but more often it is business, records of crops, lists of taxes, contracts for marriage or trade. You write down the words he says, knowing that you will be tested on them, even though you secretly believe you will never see half of these uses yourself. But there is more. Cuneiform, the teacher insists, is a weapon. A king who cannot write cannot rule. A priest who cannot read cannot speak for the gods. A merchant who cannot count is a beggar. You wonder if you believe this, or if it is simply another lesson meant to keep you in your seat, working until your back aches and your mind is numb. Outside, the city goes on, unconcerned with the shape of wedges or the future of writing. Inside, you scratch another mark into the clay, hoping it will be enough. You wonder what future children, centuries from now, will make of your words if they ever find them. Will they understand? Will they care? Or will they see only the tired hand of a boy pressed into mud, doing his best to turn chaos into order and failing more often than not? The lesson ends. The teacher gathers the tablets, stacking them in a careful pile. Remember, he says, each sign has a purpose. Each word is a footprint in the world. Walk carefully. You stare at your hands, stained with clay, and try to believe that you are making footprints, not just muddy smudges that will be washed away by the next rain. The day is only half over, and already you feel the weight of 1,000 years pressing down on your shoulders. Every wedge and every mark, a tiny reminder that history is nothing more than a long, unfinished lesson. You would think, after so many days in the Aduba, that the boredom would become easier. That, like the grooves in your stylus, it would wear down and smooth itself into something almost comfortable. But you would be wrong. The boredom of school is a living thing, stubborn and ever renewing, sprouting afresh each morning with the first bite of clay and the first echo of the teacher's voice. The day in the Eduba is measured not in hours, but in tasks. There is no sundial in the classroom, just the slow passage from one lesson to the next, each indistinguishable from the last. The teacher announces the first round of signs. You copy them. He checks your work, finds it lacking, and tells you to do it again. You do. This cycle repeats until you can no longer remember if you are learning anything at all or just filling the silence with wedges and lines. You begin to notice the small details, how the light shifts on the wall, tracing patterns in the dust, how the boys in the front row always seem a little more hopeful at the start of the day and a little more broken by the end. How the teacher's footsteps sound different depending on his mood, quick and sharp when he is angry, slow and heavy when he is disappointed, which is most of the time. Lunch is not so much a break as a brief intermission in the endless play of tedium. You eat quickly, almost guiltily, knowing that any time not spent working is time the teacher will try to reclaim. Some days, the boys try to amuse themselves with small rebellions, scribbling secret messages in the corners of their tablets, making faces at each other when the teacher's back is turned. But these are risks, and the penalties are never worth the momentary thrill. The routine becomes a cage. You wake, you write, you eat, you write again. At night, you dream of tablets and styluses, of endless columns of signs that twist and change shape just as you are about to finish. You wake more tired than when you went to sleep. The other boys are no different. You see the same dullness in their eyes, the same hunched shoulders, the same ritual sighs as the teacher calls for attention again. There are, of course, the clever ones, the boys who seem to thrive on repetition, who finish each task with a neatness and speed that is almost suspicious. You suspect they must be cheating, but you never see how. Perhaps they simply care more, or perhaps they have found some secret way to make the monotony bearable. You try to copy their methods, but your lines still waver, your attention still drifts. Sometimes you and your classmates invent small games to fill the gaps between lessons. Who can finish a line of signs fastest without making a mistake? Who can draw the smallest wedge? Who can keep a straight face when the teacher mispronounces a word? These are minor distractions, barely enough to break the surface tension of the day, but you cling to them all the same. There are moments when the teacher leaves the room, perhaps to speak with another instructor or to fetch more tablets. In these brief, golden moments, the room comes alive. Boys whisper, trade bits of news from outside, swap styluses, or simply sit in silence, savoring the absence of authority. But the moment never lasts. The teacher returns, and the silence resumes, heavier than before. You learn the art of pretending to listen while your mind is far away. You picture yourself anywhere but here, by the river, chasing dragonflies, in the bazaar, watching the potters at work, even in the fields, where at least the sun and wind are real. You try to recall the last time you felt excited to learn something, but the memory is faint, worn down by the daily grind. Every so often, the monotony is broken by a new lesson, a story from a distant city, a list of signs you have never seen before, a rare visitor who speaks in a strange accent. For a few minutes, the room buzzes with curiosity, but the novelty fades quickly, replaced by the familiar pressure to memorize, to repeat, to perform. You become an expert at counting time without a clock. The teacher's voice becomes a background hum, as constant as the rustle of reeds by the river. You measure the day by the number of tablets you fill, by the number of mistakes you make, by the number of times your mind wanders before you are caught. Boredom, you discover, has many faces. There is the sharp boredom of waiting for the teacher to notice you, the heavy boredom of copying the same sign over and over, the prickly boredom of watching someone else be punished, knowing you could be next, the bitter boredom of realizing that tomorrow will be exactly the same as today and that you are powerless to change it. You imagine that, in some distant future, someone will unearth your tablet and marvel at the patience required to make so many marks, to follow so many rules. You hope they will understand that patience was not a virtue, but a necessity, the only way to survive a world built on repetition. At the end of the day, as you gather your tools and prepare to leave, you feel the weight of the routine settle on your shoulders once again. You know that tomorrow you will be back, sitting in the same spot, pressing the same signs into the same clay, chasing the same fleeting promise of progress. But for now, you allow yourself a small moment of relief. Another day survived. Another lesson endured. You step out into the fading light, already counting the hours until you must begin again. Lunch is not a feast. Lunch is not even a reward. Lunch is simply a pause, an interruption in the endless churning of the Eduba's machinery. It arrives with no ceremony, announced not by a bell, but by the slow, collective collapse of willpower. The teacher looks up from his own work, studies the room for a long, silent moment, and finally grunts, "Enough, eat." You do not need to be told twice. Your hands already ache, your head is heavy, and the thought of food, any food, feels almost holy. You reach for your pouch, a rough cloth bundle you brought from home, and find, as always, that its contents are as predictable as the lesson itself. Today's meal, a hunk of bread, flat and dense, with the texture of sun-dried mud. You break off a piece and chew it slowly, letting the dust settle in your mouth. There is a single dried date, dark and wrinkled, clinging to itself like a secret. You savor it, saving the sweetness for last, a momentary rebellion against the monotony of your diet. The other boys spread out around the courtyard, forming tight circles of exhaustion and necessity. There are no elaborate picnics, no cheerful banter. Most eat in silence, eyes downcast, conserving energy for the trials ahead. A few exchange grumbled jokes about the bread, about the teacher, about whose mother bakes the hardest loaf. You laugh along, because to do otherwise would be to admit how tired you are. The courtyard is not much to look at, a patch of beaten earth hemmed in by high walls, with only a narrow slice of sky above. If you squint, you can almost imagine that the walls are not there, that you are free to walk away, to wander out into the city and lose yourself among the market stalls and riverbanks. But the fantasy dissolves as quickly as it appears. There are always walls, and there is always the aduba. You finish your bread, wiping crumbs from your hands. The sun overhead is relentless, baking the stones, making the air shimmer with heat. Someone has brought a flask of weak beer, barely more than river water, left to stand too long. You take a sip, grimace, and hand it back. It does little to cut the dryness in your throat, but at least it is cold. A few boys, emboldened by the temporary freedom, try to play a game, tossing pebbles at a crack in the wall, betting on who can land the most. The stakes are laughable. The loser must carry the winner's stylus for the rest of the day. But the laughter is genuine, if only for a moment. Even in the Aduba, you learn to find joy wherever you can. There are always rumors at lunch. Someone claims to have seen a real scribe in the city, ink stained hands, robes too fine for school, walking with the easy arrogance of someone who has survived the Aduba and come out the other side. Another whispers that the teacher is being watched, that a new headmaster may arrive at any day and make everyone start over from the beginning. You roll your eyes, but secretly you hope for something, anything, to break the routine. You glance toward the doorway where the teacher stands, arms crossed, keeping watch. He never eats with you. It is as if to do so would shatter the illusion of his authority. Once, someone claimed to have seen him eating bread just like yours, but no one believes it. He is not a man. He is a teacher, an entirely different species. Sometimes, one of the boys brings something special from home, a piece of honeycomb, a wedge of goat cheese, a boiled egg. These treasures are guarded fiercely, traded in hushed negotiations that would put merchants to shame. If you are very lucky, you get a taste. Most days, though, you eat what you are given and dream of better meals. You lean against the wall, eyes closed, feeling the sun on your face. For a few minutes, you are not a student. You are simply a boy, tired and hungry, taking comfort in the simple act of chewing. The world outside the walls continues, oblivious to your struggle. No. Somewhere, people are working, arguing, falling in love, dying, all without ever thinking about clay tablets or the tyranny of the stylus. But lunch is short, always too short. The teacher claps his hands, a sound as sharp as a snapped reed. The spell is broken. The boys groan, gather their things, and shuffle back inside. Some try to linger, drawing out the last moments of freedom with invented excuses, a spilled flask, a missing sandal, a pebble lodged in the heel. The teacher is unmoved. He herds you all back into the classroom with the patience of a man who has done this 1,000 times. Back inside, the air is even hotter, thicker. The clay tablets wait, stacked and ready, a silent promise of more work to come. You sit, pick up your stylus, and glance once more at the sliver of sky outside. It is fading, losing its brightness, as if in sympathy with your own fading hopes. The afternoon lessons begin. The boredom returns, heavier now, weighed down by the dullness of a half-empty belly. You find yourself longing for the next break, even as you know it will be just as brief, just as unsatisfying. You write because you must. You endure because there is no other choice. Lunch is over, and the day continues, relentless and unchanging. The work is never finished, but even in the Aduba, There are moments when lessons slow and boys whisper. The air grows heavy with anticipation and boredom, two forces that, when combined, breed something else entirely. Stories. The teacher may not believe it, but you know that rumor is the only thing that truly moves quickly in these walls. Between one lesson and the next, legends begin to sprout, creeping through the class like vines searching for sunlight. You have heard them all. Some you half believe, some you suspect were invented just to make the hours pass faster. There is the story of the boy who wrote so badly that his tablet burst into flames, a sure sign someone insists of the god Enlil's anger. There is the tale of the scribe who could write 1,000 signs in a single day without making a mistake. The teacher mentions him often, always as a threat, but no one has ever met anyone who met him. Some legends are darker. In the far corner of the classroom, behind the shelves of broken tablets, boys claim the ghost of a failed student lingers, forever writing the same sign over and over. If you listen very closely, they say, you can hear the scratching in the walls late in the day, especially when your own work is going badly. You pretend to laugh at this, but there are times, long afternoons, when the air is still and the classroom is silent, when you find yourself listening too. And then there are the stories about the teacher himself. No one knows exactly where he comes from or how long he has been here. Some say he was once a scribe to a king, exiled for an error so small no one remembers what it was. Others claim he is immortal, cursed to teach the sons of Sumer until the end of days. The bravest boys make jokes about what he does after school. Does he sleep upside down like a bat, or spend his evenings writing new punishments in clay? You know better than to let him catch you laughing. Rumors thrive on the edges of fear and desire. The older boys tell stories about the forbidden tablets, clay records hidden by the first students of the Aduba, filled with curses and secrets. They say that if you find one and read it aloud, your teacher will lose his voice for a whole week. Once, a boy claimed he had found such a tablet. He refused to show it, of course, and when pressed for proof, said he had destroyed it to avoid a curse. The story lasted all of a day before fading back into the general pool of wishful thinking. Sometimes the legends drift out of the classroom and into the city itself. You hear of tablets found buried beneath houses, inscribed with words that no one can read anymore. Those are the real secrets, someone whispers. The words of the gods themselves, hidden until the world is ready. You wonder if your own work will be lost like that, forgotten, unread, preserved only as evidence that someone was once very bored and very careful. Not all the rumors are ancient or strange. Some are painfully practical. Who has the best stylus? Whose family sends him with honey for lunch? Which boy is the teacher's favorite? These are the stories that sting, the ones that turn into jealous glances and silent rivalries. You learn to listen without appearing to listen, to speak without really saying anything, to keep your secrets close. The bravest students invent their own legends, scribbling tiny insults in the corners of their tablets. There is a kind of art to it, how to make a curse sharp enough to satisfy, but small enough not to be noticed by the teacher. If you are lucky, you can pass a tablet down the row and hear a snort of laughter, a quick grin, before it must be smoothed over and rewritten. The teacher knows it happens, but rarely bothers to punish anyone unless he is having a particularly bad day. Once, you heard of a boy who wrote an insult so clever and biting that it survived for weeks, passed from hand to hand, copied into the margins of other tablets, until even the teacher had to admit it was well done. He punished the boy anyway, but you could tell that deep down he was impressed. In Sumer, even rebellion must be clever to survive. On rare occasions, the teacher tells his own stories, always with a warning, always as a lesson. Do you know why we do not write curses? He asks, fixing you with a stare. Because words have power, and what you write may come back to haunt you. He tells of a scribe who cursed his rival in clay, only to see his own fortunes collapse. You nod solemnly, trying to look wise, while your classmates exchange smirks. You know that, given the chance, you would all do the same. You wonder what future legends will grow from your own time in the Aduba. Will someone remember the boy who always finished last? The one who could not keep his stylus from rolling off the table? Or will the stories all blur together, as indistinct and faded as old signs on a broken tablet? For now, you add your own voice to the chorus of rumors, embellishing, inventing, passing the time with words as much as with wedges. It is, in its way, a kind of writing, a way to carve your presence into the day, even if only your friends will ever remember. The teacher calls the class back to order, and the stories dissolve like water in the river, leaving behind only silence and the faint promise of more rumors tomorrow. As the day drags on, the teacher hands out a new set of clay tablets, smaller, smoother, and cleaner than the ones you use for lessons. For your families, he says, as if the extra labor is a gift. Write what you have learned, write it neatly. There is a different pressure in this assignment, a new kind of audience to imagine. It is one thing to disappoint the teacher, whose job is to be disappointed. It is another to fail in front of your own family, to send home a tablet so smeared and careless that even your little brother laughs. You have done this before, enough times to know the process. You start by smoothing the surface, pressing the edges with your fingers until the tablet feels right, even though you know perfection is impossible. The first line is always the hardest. What should you write? A list of signs, a copied proverb, a record of your attendance. The teacher claims your parents want proof of your learning, but you suspect they want something else, evidence that you are not wasting time in clay, evidence that you are not hopeless. Sometimes, if you are feeling brave, you try to add a little flourish, a fancier wedge, a border of dots, a stylized sign. It is risky. The teacher disapproves of anything that strays from the script. Writing is for record, not for decoration, he says. We are not artists, we are scribes. But you cannot help yourself. The temptation to stand out, Even just a little is too strong. You press the stylus carefully, forming each sign with the slow, deliberate movements you wish you could use in every lesson. The clay is smoother, more forgiving, but still it resists. A slip of the hand, and your neat message becomes a smudge. You try to fix it, but the mark remains, a stubborn reminder that you will never be as perfect as your father hopes. Around you, the other boys work in silence, heads bent, faces tense. For some, this is their chance to shine, to prove to parents and uncles and cousins that the Eduba is not a waste. For others, it is just one more test, one more opportunity to fall short. You hear a whispered curse as someone drops a tablet, then frantic scraping as he tries to repair the damage before the teacher notices. When you finish, you review your work, squinting at each sign as if you could will it to be better. You imagine your mother reading it, nodding with pride, or, more likely, frowning at the uneven lines. Your father will take the tablet and hold it up to the light, searching for errors, comparing your marks to his own memories of the Aduba. He will say little, but you will feel his judgment all the same. The teacher collects the finished tablets, stacking them carefully in a woven basket. Take these home, he says, and bring them back signed. The signature is not just a name, but a seal, a thumbprint pressed into the wet clay, proof that your family has seen your work. Some parents are diligent, pressing the mark with solemn ceremony. Others forget or refuse, leaving you to invent a print of your own, hoping the teacher will not look too closely. You carry the tablet home as if it were made of gold, cradling it to keep it safe from bumps and jostles. The city feels different when you are on this errand, bigger, more judgmental. Every adult seems to be watching, every child eager to peek at your work. When you reach home, your mother is waiting, hands dusted with flour, eyes bright with curiosity. She asks to see your work before you have a chance to hide it. She studies the signs, tracing each wedge with her finger. Very good, she says, even if it is not. Your hand is steadier than last week. You know she is lying, but you are grateful. Your little brother crowds close, squinting at the marks as if they hold some secret. He is too young for school, but already he knows what matters: neatness, order, the absence of mistakes. Your father examines the tablet last. He turns it over, weighs it in his palm. He does not smile. He asks what the signs mean, and you recite them by rote, hoping you remember the right answers. Sometimes he nods, sometimes he sighs. On rare occasions, he corrects a mark, smoothing it over with his own thumb before handing it back. His thumbprint joins yours, pressed deep and hard, as if to remind you who truly owns your learning. Once your mother asked if you could keep a tablet, a record of your best work, something to show visitors. The teacher said no. Clay is for the living, not for display, he explained. You will have many tablets. There is no need for pride. But you suspect the real reason is simpler. There is never enough clay, Never enough time, never enough space for anything but the next lesson. On market days, you see that other boys carrying their tablets, comparing signs and stories, boasting or complaining. Some tablets are beautifully made, the marks deep and even. Others are rushed, half finished, their messages lost in smudges. You overhear a father scolding his son for sloppy work, a mother promising a treat for neat lines. The tablets are more than assignments, they are currency, tokens of hope and disappointment, evidence of who is rising and who is falling. You know that in time, these home tablets will be soaked and scraped clean, the signs erased, the clay used again for some other boy's lesson. But for a day or two, they matter. For a day or two, they are the bridge between school and home, between who you are and who you are supposed to become. You watch your mother set your tablet aside, careful not to let your little brother touch it. It is good, she says again, but next time write a little neater. You nod, promising to try, already knowing that the next tablet will be just as difficult, just as imperfect. That night, as you lie awake, you imagine all the tablets in all the houses of Sumer, each one a silent plea for understanding, each one a hope pressed into clay. You wonder if anyone will remember your signs, or if they will all be lost, washed away by the next rain, or ground underfoot in the rush of daily life. In the morning, you return to school, tablet in hand, thumbprint proof of your family's involvement. The teacher takes it, glances at the mark, and adds it to the pile. Another record, another day, another wedge pressed into the endless, unforgiving mud of memory. You thought writing was hard. Then the teacher brings out the mathematics tablets, and the day takes on a new shade of dread. It is not enough to write, he says. A scribe must count. A scribe must measure. Words mean nothing without numbers. You suppress a groan. The numbers of Sumer do not behave like numbers in stories. They are slippery, unpredictable things with rules that seem designed to trip you up at every step. The teacher starts with the basics, as if anyone could forget. He draws a neat row of wedge-shaped marks on his tablet. 1, 2, 3. But then, instead of going to 4 and 5, he jumps 10, 60, 600. The numbers sprawl out in patterns that make your head ache. Sumer does not believe in the simple comfort of tens. Here, everything is measured in 60s, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 60, 600, 3,600. Your classmates call it the circle number, a riddle invented by bored gods. You copy the marks, your stylus dragging through the clay, trying to keep each wedge uniform. The sign for 1 is easy, a single stroke. For 10, a wedge tilted to the side. But 60, it is a cluster, a handful of signs mashed together as if numbers should be crowded like people at market. You lose track easily, your rows tilting into chaos, the numbers blurring into meaninglessness. The teacher calls on you to solve a problem. If a merchant brings 3 baskets of dates and each basket holds 60 dates, How many dates in all? You stare at your tablet, the numbers refusing to come together. 360s, 180. But how do you write it? Your mind races, the wedge signs leaping about, and you realize you have written 600 by mistake. The teacher sighs, corrects your work with a quick slash, and moves on. You bite your tongue, feeling the heat in your cheeks. Mathematics in Sumer is not just about numbers. It is about shapes, about volumes, about the weight of grain and the length of fields. There are special signs for every measure, each with their own rules and exceptions. The teacher explains how to count livestock, how to calculate the area of a field, how to divide a jar of oil among neighbors without causing a riot. He says that a good scribe can keep a city running, can prevent famine, can make or break a merchant with a single calculation. You suspect that a good scribe is simply one who can keep the numbers straight. You remember your father sitting at home in the evening, counting out grain with quick, sure marks, never hesitating, never confused. You wonder if he was born knowing these things, or if he too once stared at a tablet with no idea how to make sense of the mess. The teacher claims that in Sumer, even the gods need scribes to keep their accounts. You do not know if that is a comfort. Your classmates grumble and sigh, scratching their heads, erasing and rewriting their work. The cleverest boy in class gets the answer first, his numbers lined up in neat rows. He smirks as the teacher praises him, but you know he spent all last night practicing. You tell yourself you will do the same, but you also know you will forget as soon as the lesson is over. There is a story about the invention of zero, a concept so strange, so bold, that even the teacher seems a little uneasy speaking of it. Once, he says, we needed a sign for nothing, for the space between. He draws two tiny wedges on the tablet, side by side, not quite touching. This is how we remember absence. Even nothing must be counted. You wonder how many times you have counted nothing today, how many lines erased, how many mistakes smoothed away, how many hopes set aside. After the basics come the problems, each more baffling than the last. The teacher reads them aloud, slowly, as if repeating a spell. A farmer plants 6 fields, each with 80 barley seeds. How many seeds in all? A baker has 5 loaves, cuts each into 4 pieces, gives 3 pieces to each neighbor. How many neighbors? The numbers jumble in your mind. You stare at your clay, making tiny dots and dashes in the margins, trying to work it out without betraying your confusion. There are always those who cheat, who copy the answers from their neighbors, or who invent solutions on the spot, hoping the teacher is too tired to check. Sometimes the teacher catches them, makes them stand in the corner, holding a tablet above their head. More often, he sighs and moves on, knowing that true understanding cannot be forced. Mathematics becomes a new kind of boredom, a different shape to the monotony. You copy the same problems, fill your tablet with numbers and marks, erase and start again. The teacher insists that this is the foundation of all knowledge. The world is numbers, he says. The sun rises because it is time. The river floods because it is measured. The market thrives because prices are written. You nod, pretending to agree, but you are not sure the world cares about your calculations. In the quiet moments between problems, you imagine a different life, one where numbers are simple, where everything adds up, where mistakes can be erased without shame. But Sumer is not that kind of place. Here, numbers are a language you must learn, a trap you must escape, a test you must pass again and again. At the end of the lesson, your tablet is a mess of signs, some neat, some hopeless. The teacher collects them, stacks them with a sigh. You will get better, he says, not as a promise, but as an order. You leave the classroom, your head spinning with numbers, the signs dancing behind your eyes. You know that tomorrow the numbers will be waiting for you, just as difficult, just as unkind. For now, you are grateful for the chance to forget, even if only for a little while. No day in the Aduba is allowed to pass without the reminder that your work is not just for teachers, parents, or even future kings. It is also for the gods, whose invisible gaze is said to linger over every lesson and every mistake. The teacher begins this part of the day by setting aside his usual sternness for something heavier, a kind of ceremonial gravity. Before there was writing, he intones, there were prayers. Before there were scribes, there was the goddess Nisaba. You know this story as well as you know your own boredom. Nisaba, goddess of writing, wisdom, and grain. She is the one who watches over students like you, or so the teacher says, with a patience greater than any human. There are little clay figurines of her in every classroom, small, round faced, holding a stylus, her eyes wide and unblinking. You wonder if she ever blinks at all, if she grows weary of watching boys fumble their way through her invention. The teacher makes you stand, face the altar at the front of the room. He leads you in a prayer you have recited so many times that the words have lost all meaning, flowing out of your mouth like water over worn stones. Great Nisaba, keeper of the reed and the clay, bless our hands, steady our thoughts, make our lines straight and true. The room echoes with the sound of bored devotion. The teacher listens for mistakes in pronunciation, ready to pounce, as if the goddess herself will take offense at a poorly formed syllable. There are rituals for everything in Sumer. You pour out a few drops of water onto the classroom floor, a miniature libation to please the unseen. You burn a scrap of incense, the smoke rising in a wavering line. The teacher claims that the scent drives away evil spirits, or at least the spirits of laziness and confusion that haunt every classroom. Sometimes you wonder if the incense is actually meant to keep you awake. After the prayer, the teacher tells the story of the first scribe, a man chosen by the gods to keep order in the world. He wrote down the names of the stars and the days of the week. He wrote the words of kings and the rules of the fields. He kept track of the harvest and the debts, the prayers and the promises. The list goes on and on. You are supposed to feel awe, but all you can feel is the weight of your own tablet in your lap, heavier than any myth. The teacher reminds you that every tablet you write is a kind of offering, a way to please the gods and ensure the city's prosperity. When you write, he says, you take part in the divine work. Every mark is sacred. You wonder sometimes what the gods would make of your wobbly lines and smeared signs. Would they laugh? Would they care? There is a story, told in a whisper, of a scribe who angered the gods by writing false records. His crops failed, his house flooded, and eventually his name was erased from all the tablets in the city. The teacher uses this tale as a warning. Write with care, write with truth. The gods remember. You have never met anyone punished by the gods for bad handwriting, but you smooth out your clay a little more carefully just in case. Some rituals are more mundane. On festival days, you write out hymns in careful, beautiful signs, copying the teacher's tablet exactly. You are supposed to believe that the gods read your work, that your prayers are carried to the heavens on the back of each wedge and line. The teacher says the goddess Nisaba favors those who write with diligence, that she may one day grant you wisdom or inspiration if you please her. Secretly, you hope she grants you a day off. The teacher also speaks of omens. Watch for signs, he says, as if the gods are leaving you notes in the dust. A broken stylus may mean a warning, a perfect tablet, a blessing. There are rituals for these too, a quick prayer for a lost tool, a silent thanks for an unbroken lesson. You go through the motions, neither believing nor disbelieving. In Sumer, the line between superstition and survival is very thin. Your classmates each have their own way of honoring the gods. Some are devout, reciting every prayer with loud, clear voices. Others mumble through the words, eyes on the floor, thinking about lunch. A few make secret offerings, a drop of honey, a bit of bread, hidden in the cracks of the classroom wall. No one speaks of these acts, but everyone knows. The gods, after all, are always watching. The teacher finishes the lesson with a final blessing, his voice softer than usual. May Nisaba guide your hand. May your words be true. You bow your head, not out of faith, but out of habit. The lesson moves on, but the weight of the ritual remains, lingering in the quiet that follows. As you return to your writing, you glance at the little clay figurine of Nisaba and wonder what she thinks of your work. Does she remember her own days as a student, struggling with signs and numbers? Or is she simply amused by the endless procession of hopeful, anxious scribes? You will never know. In Sumer, the gods are close enough to fear, but far enough to ignore your mistakes. At least, that is what you hope. You press your stylus into the clay with extra care, whisper a silent prayer for patience, and prepare yourself for the next task, as sacred and as tedious as the last. There are ordinary days in the Aduba, and then there are days of inspection. The word itself carries a special chill. You wake up knowing something is different. The city feels quieter, the air heavier. Your mother reminds you to wash your hands, to brush the dust from your tunic, to eat a proper breakfast, as if any of this will make a difference. Exams are coming, and the whole house feels the tension. When you arrive at school, you can see it on the faces of the other boys. Everyone is anxious, even the ones who never make mistakes. The classroom is unusually clean. The tablets are stacked neatly, the styluses arranged like soldiers waiting for orders. Even the teacher is different, more formal, less forgiving, watching you all with the flat gaze of a priest about to judge a sacrifice. The exam begins with the ritual distribution of fresh clay tablets. Today you will show what you have learned, the teacher says. His tone is not unkind, but neither is it gentle. You take your tablet, feeling its weight, its smooth, untouched surface. For a moment, you almost feel hope. This could be the day you finally impress your teacher, your father, even yourself. But hope is fragile. The exam is always harder than you expect. The teacher dictates a list of signs and words, pausing just long enough for your anxiety to build. You copy them as best you can, trying to remember the right angles, the proper order, the secret tricks you have heard whispered in the courtyard. Your stylus slips once, twice, and you fight the urge to smooth the mark and start over. There is no time. The questions become more complicated. Numbers and measures, the area of a field, the correct way to list the contents of a granary, a proverb to copy by heart. The teacher walks among you, silent, his sandals soft against the packed earth. He stops behind each boy, watching, waiting. You feel his gaze on your neck, and your hand trembles. If you are lucky, he moves on. If not, he corrects your work on the spot, marking your tablet with a quick, dismissive wedge. You hear someone sniffling quietly in the corner, the sound quickly swallowed by the scratching of styluses and the thudding of anxious hearts. There are always tears during exams, though no one mentions them afterward. Shame is just another part of the process. Once, in a rare moment of generosity, the teacher explained the meaning behind the inspection. It is not punishment, he said. It is proof to your families, to the city, to the gods, that you are worthy of the clay and the reed. If you succeed, you will go far. If not, you will find another life, and perhaps the gods will be kinder. When the writing is finished, you line up to hand in your tablets. The teacher examines each one in turn, his eyes narrow, his face unreadable. Occasionally he murmurs approval, a rare, fleeting reward that makes you stand a little taller. More often, he sighs, scratches a correction, moves on. For the worst mistakes, there is the dreaded instruction: you will stay after to rewrite this. You watch the unlucky boys shuffle to the back of the room, clutching their tablets like condemned men. Sometimes, a visiting official from the temple or the palace appears, watching the inspection with cold detachment. Their presence is a warning. The city itself is watching, and the standards are not negotiable. The teacher is more strict on these days, less willing to overlook small errors. You wonder if he too feels the pressure, if he fears being judged as much as you do. For the best students, there may be a reward, a sweet cake, a rare treat of dried fruit, a word of praise that will be repeated at home and in the marketplace for weeks. You have tasted these rewards only rarely, but the memory lingers, a brief golden moment when all the work seems worth it. For the rest, there is only relief when the exam is over, when the tablets are collected and the pressure lifts, if only a little. You are not supposed to talk about your results, but everyone does. In the courtyard, the boys compare their marks, boast or complain, invent excuses for every mistake. Some are crushed, others defiant. A few pretend not to care at all, though you can see the disappointment in their eyes. At home, your family asks how you did, and you recite the teacher's words as if they were your own. They listen closely, searching for hope in your voice. You learn that exams are not just about knowledge, but about endurance. How long you can keep your hands steady, how well you can hide your fear, how quickly you can recover from a mistake. They are about surviving judgment, about proving again and again that you belong here, that you are not wasting the clay, the time, the future. After the inspection, there is a strange, heavy silence. The classroom feels emptier, the day longer. You stare at your hands, stained with clay and sweat, and wonder if you will ever be good enough. The teacher says that the gods reward perseverance, that every mistake is a lesson. You are not sure if you believe him, but you have learned to keep going anyway. Tomorrow, the lessons will resume, the routine will return. But for now, you carry the weight of the inspection home with you, a mixture of shame, relief, and the faint hope that next time you will do better. There is no lesson in the Aduba about the social structure of Sumer, but you learn it all the same. You learn it in the silences between lessons, in the way the teacher looks at some students and through others, in the subtle calculus of who sits where and who speaks first. The hierarchy is woven through the school like the warp and weft of a reed mat, sometimes invisible, always there. You notice early that not all boys are treated equally. There are those whose fathers are priests, merchants, or officials, men of influence, with rings on their fingers and servants at their heels. Their sons arrive at school in clean tunics, with fresh clay and styluses so new they barely have splinters. These boys talk loudly, laugh easily, and never seem afraid of punishment. The teacher is strict with them, but never truly harsh. Their mistakes are corrected quietly, their jokes tolerated, their failures explained away as misunderstandings. Then there are boys like you, sons of scribes, of craftsmen, of people who work but do not command. Your clay is reused, your stylus rough, your tunic patched and stained. You learn to be careful, to listen more than you speak, to keep your head down when the teacher's gaze sweeps the room. You are not invisible, but you are not important. Your mistakes are noticed, your jokes ignored, your failures held up as warnings. There are also those who are poorer still, sons of reed cutters, water carriers, men who owe debts they will never repay. These boys do not always last long in the Aduba. Sometimes they disappear without explanation, their seats filled by others, their names erased from the lists. When you ask the teacher, he only shrugs. Some are not meant for learning, he says, as if fate itself has spoken. You realize quickly that every boy is being measured, weighed, judged, not just on his ability to write or count, but on the shadow of his family name. The boys from wealthy homes are given second and third chances. The rest of you are expected to succeed on the first try, or else accept your place at the bottom. Merit, you discover, is a fine thing unless it gets in the way of tradition. Sometimes the teacher speaks openly about the path that lies ahead. The best among you will become scribes in the temples, the palaces, the granaries. You will serve kings and gods. The rest will find other work. He says this as if it is simply the way of the world, as unchangeable as the flood of the river or the rising of the sun. The boys from important families joke about their futures, argue over who will have the best posting, who will marry the prettiest girl, who will be invited to the most feasts. The rest of you talk quietly, if at all, about what comes next. Some dream of being scribes, yes, but most are already making plans for simpler lives, trading, farming, perhaps even leaving the city for good. You notice the small ways social structure shows itself in daily life. The best seats are always claimed by the same few boys. The teacher uses their names more often, praises their work more loudly, trusts them with important messages. When a visitor comes to the school, it is these boys who are chosen to demonstrate a lesson, to recite a proverb, to hand out tablets. Their confidence is a shield, forged not just by ability, but by the certainty that they belong. But even they must be careful. A boy whose father falls out of favor finds his privileges vanish overnight. A family's debt can erase years of achievement. In Sumer, fortunes rise and fall like the river, and no one is ever entirely secure. You keep this in mind, storing it away as quietly as you store your stylus at the end of each lesson. The teacher tells you more than once that writing is a ladder. It can lift you above your station, he says, if you are clever and diligent, but it can also break beneath your feet. You wonder how many boys have fallen, how many marks on clay have been the last, not the first, step on the ladder. You overhear the older boys talking about the real world outside the Aduba. They speak of scribes who run entire estates, who are trusted by kings, who sit at the feet of the high priests and whisper advice. These are the stories of those who climbed high. But there are other stories too, quieter and harder to find, of men who lost their jobs, who made one mistake too many, who now sell ink or tablets in the market, pretending they were never students at all. You know your parents hope for better. Your mother tells you that hard work is enough, that talent will shine through. Your father is less certain. He reminds you in a low voice that a scribe must always be useful to someone with power. Be loyal, he says, but never too loyal. Learn to read faces as well as tablets. You try, but the lessons are complicated and never written down. At home, you see the difference in small things. The way your family stands a little straighter when a visitor comes. The careful politeness when speaking of the teacher or the head of the city. You understand that school is not just about signs and numbers, but about learning your place in the world and maybe how to move beyond it. Sometimes you envy the boys with easy futures whose fathers have already arranged their lives. Other times you pity them. They have less to hope for, less to prove. Their victories are expected, their failures quietly ignored. For you, everything must be earned, every mark on clay a small rebellion, every lesson a step upward. The school day ends, and you file out with the others, feeling the invisible lines that separate you from your classmates. Tomorrow, they will be here again, in the same seats with the same privileges. Tomorrow, you will be here too, with your patched tunic and your stubborn hope. In Sumer, the clay remembers every mark, but the world remembers every name, and not all names are equal. Every school has its secrets. The Aduba is no different. You learn to sense them, not in the official lessons, but in the hurried whispers and sideways glances of the older boys. After enough weeks, you hear the phrase for the first time: forbidden tablets. It sounds dangerous, thrilling, and of course, the more the teacher warns against them, the more you want to know. It starts innocently, as most trouble does. One afternoon, after the last lesson, a group of older students lingers in the corner of the courtyard, their voices low, their laughter just a little too sharp. You watch from a safe distance as one boy, bolder than the rest, pulls something from beneath his tunic, a clay tablet, smaller and darker than any used in class. The edges are rough, the surface covered with signs you do not recognize. The other boys lean in, hungry for a glimpse. Careful, someone hisses. You want the teacher to see, but the teacher is busy, deep in conversation with a visitor, and the boys relax. The forbidden tablet is passed around, examined with awe. You hear fragments of stories. It holds a love poem, or a dirty joke, or a list of curses meant to bring down the wrath of the gods on an enemy. Someone claims it was copied from a hidden archive in the temple where the real secrets are kept. Someone else scoffs and says it's just a list of bad words written backward. Later, you ask your friend what the tablet really said. He shrugs, unwilling to share the secret with someone younger. If you want to know, he says, make your own. The idea sticks in your mind all day. Forbidden tablets. What could be more interesting than that? The truth is, there is a whole hidden curriculum running parallel to your lessons. The art of secrecy, of rebellion, of creating something that exists just outside the teacher's control. The forbidden tablets are everywhere, though you are never sure exactly where. Some are hidden in cracks in the wall, behind loose bricks, buried in the dust beneath a row of benches. You imagine the Iduba as a kind of living creature, its guts stuffed with lost jokes, Forgotten stories, secret confessions pressed into clay by hands just like yours. Not all forbidden tablets are about mischief. Some are love notes exchanged between students with a daring your own heart cannot match. Some are songs, snatches of melody and rhyme that make the boredom of school bearable. The most dangerous are the curses, elaborate and specific, intended for rivals or strict teachers. May your stylus always break. May your clay never smooth. May your tablet crack before the inspection. You laugh at the boldness, but there is a sliver of fear. What if the curses work? The teacher, of course, is not ignorant. From time to time, he makes a show of searching for contraband tablets, overturning benches, tapping at walls, interrogating anyone who looks nervous. He usually finds nothing, just a bit of dust, maybe a broken stylus or an old lunch crumb. When he does catch someone, the punishment is severe. The forbidden tablet is smashed, the culprit made to copy lines of pious proverbs until his hand aches. There is no place for mischief in the house of tablets, the teacher says. But the very severity of his reaction only increases the allure. You learn to read the warning signs. The sudden hush when an adult approaches, the practiced innocence in the eyes of those hiding something. You practice your own look of ignorance, even as your fingers itch to join the secret game. Some days, you dream of making your own forbidden tablet, just to see what it feels like to create something not meant for approval or inspection. Late one afternoon, you finally gather the courage. You steal a bit of clay, shape it quickly, pressing your signs in tiny, secretive wedges. It is nothing dramatic, just a simple sentence about the teacher's beard, a private joke you know would not survive the light of day. You hide the tablet beneath a loose brick, your heart hammering in your chest. For the rest of the week, you visit it every chance you get, reading it over, daring yourself to add a new line. For a while, nothing happens. The teacher is none the wiser. You tell no one, not even your closest friend. The forbidden tablet is yours alone, a small act of rebellion in a world ruled by rules. But then, one morning, you find the brick out of place. The tablet is gone. Panic and pride war inside you. Did the teacher find it? Did another student take it to read and laugh in secret? You never find out. Life goes on. The official lessons resume, as tedious and demanding as ever. The forbidden tablets remain, sometimes glimpsed, often lost, always whispered about. Their existence is proof that for all the discipline and order, the Aduba is still full of life and imagination, a place where even under the watchful eyes of teachers and gods, you can carve out a space for yourself. The stories about forbidden tablets never die. Every year brings new rumors of a tablet so clever it made the teacher laugh, of a curse so powerful the headmaster's goat dropped dead, of a love poem that found its way into the hands of a priest's daughter. You begin to understand that these stories are more than jokes. They are a way of resisting the monotony, of holding on to a little piece of your own spirit in a world that wants to shape you into something else. Someday, you think, someone may find your tablet buried under layers of dust and time. Maybe they will laugh, maybe they will add their own line, continuing a secret tradition stretching back as far as memory itself. For now, the forbidden tablets remain hidden, a quiet rebellion echoing through the clay halls of the Aduba, reminding you that even in Sumer, even under the weight of tradition, there is always room for mischief. Evening comes slowly to the Aduba. The sun sinks behind the mud brick walls, stretching long shadows across the courtyard, and you can feel the exhaustion settling over every boy like a heavy, familiar blanket. The air cools, but the classroom still clings to the day's heat, holding it in the walls and the stone floor, as if unwilling to surrender even that much comfort to the night. You are tired in every way a person can be tired. Your fingers ache from pressing signs into clay. Your legs are stiff from sitting cross legged for hours. But there is more than just physical fatigue. There is a kind of weariness that comes from knowing tomorrow will look exactly like today, and the day after will be the same again. A horizon lined not with hope, but with tablets and lessons and the unbroken rhythm of the Aduba. The last lesson always feels the longest. The teacher moves slower, his voice less sharp, but no less relentless, as if he too is caught in the mud of routine. He recites the final list of signs, sometimes reviewing old proverbs, sometimes making you rewrite a passage from the morning. No one is at their best in these last moments. Mistakes multiply as minds drift, and even the best students find themselves wishing for home. You look around at your classmates. Some fight sleep, blinking rapidly or pinching their own arms under the desk. A few give up entirely, letting their heads dip forward, earning a gentle but firm tap from the teacher's stylus. You envy the boys whose families live close by, whose walk home is short and sweet. For you and many others, home is still a long walk away, through narrow streets, already darkening as the city prepares for night. The teacher announces that it is time to finish, but there is no rush for the door. There are tablets to be checked, mistakes to be corrected, styluses to be collected and counted. The Aduba is not a place you can escape easily. You wait in line to hand in your last tablet, hoping the teacher will not find a new error. If you are lucky, he gives a brief nod. If not, he simply sets the tablet aside, saving any scolding for tomorrow. Outside, the sounds of the city shift. The merchants are packing up their wares. The smells of evening fires drift through the streets. Somewhere, a dog barks. A distant song rises, thin and plaintive. It is a reminder that there is a life beyond school, but for now, it feels far away. Before you leave, the teacher gives his nightly warning. Take care of your tablets, he says. Do not lose your stylus. Do not let your mind grow soft overnight. Scribes must be vigilant even at home. It is hard to imagine being vigilant about anything after such a day. Most of you just nod, too tired to argue. Sometimes the teacher gives one last task. carry a message to a neighbor, help stack tablets in the storeroom, or sweep the dust from the floor. You do it automatically, the motions etched into your muscles by repetition. You envy the boys already outside, their laughter echoing down the street as they race each other home. There are other evenings, too, when you are given a tablet to take home, an unfinished exercise, a problem you failed, a proverb to copy until it stays in your mind. You tuck it under your arm, feeling the sticky coolness of the clay seep into your skin. You promise yourself you will work on it after supper, though you know you will put it off as long as you can. The city at dusk is different from the city at dawn. In the evening, everything softens, voices lower, footsteps slow, the sharp urgency of the day replaced by something gentler, if only for a little while. You walk with other boys, sometimes talking, sometimes not. The conversation drifts. Whose hands hurt most? Whose tablet was most praised? What strange thing the teacher did today? Occasionally, you share a rumor or a half remembered story, the last fuel for laughter before parting ways. When you reach home, your mother asks about your day. You tell her the truth or a version of it, what you learned, what you forgot, whether you were scolded. She listens, her hands busy with dinner or cleaning, her face a mix of pride and worry. Your father, if he is home, checks your tablet with a careful eye, looking for improvement, for proof that his sacrifices are not in vain. You eat in silence, grateful for the food, already dreading tomorrow. You look at your hands, still streaked with traces of clay, and wonder if they will ever truly be clean. You think about your unfinished work, about the teacher's warnings, about the endless procession of signs waiting for you at sunrise. Sometimes, late at night, you hear your parents talking quietly. They wonder if the effort is worth it, if you will rise above your station, if the aduba is making you wiser or simply more tired. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the days until you are old enough to leave the school behind. But even as you dream of escape, you cannot imagine a life without the weight of clay, without the shape of the stylus pressed into your fingers. As you drift to sleep, you remember the faces of your classmates in the fading light, the teacher's tired voice, the sound of styluses scratching the last lines into the day. You wonder if they too lie awake at night, feeling the same mix of hope and exhaustion, the same longing for something different. Morning will come soon enough. The adoba will call you back, and you will answer. For tonight, though, you are free, if only in your dreams. In the quiet moments between lessons, or in the long, slow hours of evening, you sometimes let yourself imagine what comes after the aduba. It is a vision shaped by stories, told in half whispers by teachers, by fathers, by older boys already on the verge of leaving. It is a future painted in clay, ambition and uncertainty, a life not quite promised, but always dangled just out of reach. The ideal, of course, is simple. You finish your schooling, you prove yourself worthy, and the doors open. You become a scribe. You sit at a real desk in a real office, surrounded by tall windows and high shelves heavy with important tablets. People come to you, merchants with contracts, priests with prayers, farmers with grain tallies, city officials with a dozen different lists and demands. You, and you alone, can write the words that matter. In these moments of fantasy, you see yourself as powerful, no longer a tired boy hunched over a tablet, but a man with command of a secret language. You imagine your father's pride, your mother's quiet relief. Perhaps your family's name will be spoken with respect. Perhaps you will even be invited to a feast, your skills recognized by someone important. But the dream has its shadows. You know, even now, that most scribes do not rise to the highest ranks. For every scribe who advises kings or records prophecies for the priests, there are dozens who labor in the background, writing tax records and inventory lists until their hands cramp and their eyes blur. You remember the stories of grown men, once students like you, who spend their days counting barley in the market stalls, recording debts that will never be paid, copying the same sentences over and over from masters who barely remember their names. Sometimes the teacher speaks honestly about what awaits you. A scribe's life is a good life, he says. Better than digging ditches, better than hauling bricks. You will not go hungry. You will not be forgotten. He pauses, just long enough for you to feel the weight of the but that follows. But you must work hard. The city does not forgive mistakes. The gods do not reward the lazy. You wonder about the scribes who made mistakes, the ones who misspoke a number, who recorded the wrong measure, who angered the wrong noble. The punishment for such errors is never discussed in detail, but you see it in the haunted looks of the older boys, in the whispered warnings to double check your work, to trust no one with your stylus or your clay. There is status in being a scribe, but it is a fragile status. In the palace, scribes are expected to be invisible, silent, precise, never questioning. In the temple, they are respected but always watched. It is said that even the high priests keep two scribes, one to write the truth and one to rewrite it. You wonder which you would rather be. Your family hopes for a steady life, a chance to rise. Your mother dreams of you marrying well, your children inheriting a name untarnished by debt or shame. Your father remembers the taste of failure and warns you, in quiet moments, not to trust too easily, not to boast, not to forget where you came from. You promise yourself you will remember. You imagine sometimes what it would feel like to have your own apprentice, a nervous boy, staring at you with wide eyes, hoping for a kind word or a crumb of advice. Would you be stern, as your teacher was? Would you allow jokes, a hidden tablet or two? Or would you warn him that adulthood is just another lesson, with higher stakes and harsher punishments? You wonder about the scribes who are truly free, the ones who write poems for lovers, who carve stories into clay for the pure joy of it, who find ways to slip their own voice into the city's endless record. You have heard of these men, but you do not know if you believe in them. In Sumer, freedom is always qualified, always conditional. There is work to be done, and someone, somewhere, who will notice if you pause to dream. Sometimes you think that nothing will ever change, that you will simply move from one set of rules to another, from the aduba to the office, from the classroom to the storeroom. But then you remember the forbidden tablets, the jokes whispered between friends, the stories that survive not because they are official, but because someone bothered to remember. You realize, with a start, that being a scribe means carrying more than just a stylus and a tablet. It means carrying the memories of those who came before you, the hopes of those who depend on you, the rules and the exceptions, the visible and the hidden stories. It is a heavy burden, but it is yours. As you lie in bed, on the edge of sleep, you try to imagine your future. Will you be a scribe in the palace, a teacher in the aduba, a wandering clerk in some distant city? Or will you find yourself, like so many before you, hunched over a tablet in a cold, dark room, counting someone else's beans, dreaming of a freedom that always seems just out of reach? Whatever the answer, you know that tomorrow you will pick up your stylus again. You will write because you must, because it is your best chance, because it is what you have been shaped to do. The adult life of a scribe is not promised, not secure, but it is a path, muddy, difficult, and sometimes illuminated by the faintest glimmer of pride. And for now, that is enough. Years pass, though you do not feel them as they happen. One day, you are no longer a boy huddled over a clay tablet, anxiously watching the teacher's shadow stretch across the floor. The mud brick walls of the aduba fade into the background, replaced by the offices, storerooms, and bustling streets of adult life. You catch yourself surprised now and then by the quietness with which childhood recedes, a silent erasure, like a smudge of clay swept clean with the edge of a palm. Your hands are still marked by your schooling in more ways than one. The calluses never really disappear. There are nights when you catch yourself flexing your fingers as if readying them to press another sign, to smooth another tablet. Your handwriting, once a matter of life and death, has become part of you, so natural that you no longer think about it, even as you fill tablet after tablet with names, numbers, and the stories of others. You see of other scribes now, men who were once your classmates, scattered through the city. Some have risen high. The quick witted boy from the front row now works at the temple, his hands steady as he tallies offerings for the gods. The quiet, careful one copies decrees in the palace, his face older, but his eyes just as alert. A few have disappeared entirely, their fates lost to rumor, a bad debt, a failed calculation, a journey to another city that no one quite believes. Your own path is somewhere between, not glorious, not tragic. You work, you write. Some days you find satisfaction in the neatness of your records or in the brief nod of approval from a master or overseer. Other days you simply endure, caught between the boredom of routine and the anxiety of mistakes that never quite stop haunting you. When the city celebrates a festival, you sometimes catch sight of the Iduba in the distance, the sunlight glinting off its baked clay walls. You wonder what the new generation of boys is learning, whether the teacher is still as stern, still as weary, still as capable of turning a moment of inattention into a lifelong memory. You imagine them stumbling over the same signs, scribbling the same forbidden jokes, hiding tablets in cracks, and dreaming of a future they can barely name. Occasionally, a parent will bring a child to you, wide eyed, nervous, clutching a tablet marked with the uncertain hand of someone who has just learned to write. You see yourself in them, a flicker of old fear mixed with hope. Sometimes you offer advice, though it is always the same: practice, patience, caution. Sometimes you simply smile, recognizing that they will have to learn it all themselves the hard way. You realize that the lessons of the Aduba have shaped more than your writing. The rhythms of Sumerian school, the monotony, the pressure, the rare bursts of laughter have seeped into your bones. You find yourself rising early, wary of being late, careful with your words. You remember to watch the faces of those in power, to listen before you speak, to hold back the sharpest jokes for trusted friends. These are things the teacher never wrote on a tablet, but somehow you remember them better than any sign or proverb. The memories of school come back at odd times. The scent of river mud after rain, the taste of dry bread, the scrape of a reed stylus against a tablet. Sometimes, on restless nights, you dream of the classroom, of the silence before a punishment, the soft laughter after a secret triumph, the comfort of shared boredom. In your dreams, you are always younger, the future unwritten, the clay fresh and smooth and full of possibility. You wonder what will become of all the tablets you have written, records of taxes, contracts, prayers, curses, daily lists, and fleeting stories. Most will be broken, washed back into the earth, ground to dust beneath countless feet. A few will survive, buried in the walls of a house, lost in the corner of a storeroom, discovered centuries later by strangers who know nothing of your name, your hopes, or your failures. You imagine these future archaeologists, people with strange tools, strange clothes, peering at your work through layers of time. They will puzzle over your handwriting, marvel at your neatest lines, frown at your mistakes, invent stories about the boy or man who pressed them into the clay. Perhaps they will wonder about your teacher, your family, your dreams. Perhaps they will sigh, as you once did, at the weight of expectation pressed into every sign. Looking back, you do not romanticize your schooling. It was boring. It was hard. It was in some ways cruel, but it made you what you are. In the darkest moments of adult life, when mistakes seem fatal, when routines grind you down, you remember the Aduba. You remember that you survived, that sometimes just surviving is enough. Now, as you grow older, you find humor in your memories. You laugh at the terror you once felt at a smudged tablet, at the forbidden tablets hidden in cracks, at the endless cycle of lessons, punishments, and rare praise. You wonder if the Aduba was ever meant to be more than this: a place to learn patience, to grow calluses, to practice the art of boredom until you mastered it. You watch the sun set behind the old walls and feel a strange mix of nostalgia and relief. You are no longer a boy trapped in a schoolroom. You are a grown scribe with worries and hopes of your own, and the power to choose, at least sometimes, what story you will write next. You know now that even if your signs are forgotten, even if the world changes and clay gives way to something new, someone somewhere might remember that there was once a student in the Eduba, unremarkable, imperfect, but real. And as sleep overtakes you, you give thanks for the dullness, for the monotony, for the endless days that taught you how to endure, how to hope, how to keep writing, even when it seemed no one would ever read a single word.